we are doing a brief intro to foundations of Islamic economics. Before we continue with our fourth session, let's just spend a couple of minutes, doing a recap of what we did last week. We are talking about the question, what is Islamic economics? And last week, we basically made two important points. One is Islamic economics, well, economics must reintegrate ethics with the economics that we are used to. This is in modern economics. There's enough of evidence to show that economics has to go back to its roots. What are those roots? I think we were quoting Amartya Sen, who talked about ethics and what he called engineering. And therefore, because of the numerous crises that are going on, therefore he proposes, and many people agree with him, that economics has to go back and reintegrate with its ethical roots. Now, that's economics as a whole. Islamic economics certainly is an ethics-based economics, but the difference between Islamic economics and ethics-based economics is Islamic economics must be a religion-based ethical economics. In other words, the ethical precepts, the guidelines that we are going to integrate with our way of looking at economics comes from the religion of Islam, right? And I hope that all of you will be able to connect it back to our discussion in the first session and even in the second session. When you talk about religion, then we go back to the concept of deen. We talk about this concept of deen covering all aspects of life, including the economics. So we talk about the sources of knowledge. We talk about the Sharia as the guidelines or the guidance for us. And therefore, it is this religion that provides not only the legal basis, but also the ethical basis of this economics. So that's what we did, in the last session. And today, we'll just have, maybe about 6 or 7 slides, just very, very briefly to talk about what Islamic economics is, right? Now, when we want to talk about definitions of Islamic economics, when you say what is Islamic economics, usually people expect there should be a definition. So we are so used to it, but we don't realize that in the history of economics, there has actually been a debate about whether or not we need to have a definition. So you have some scholars, some economists, who feel that we don't need to have definition. And on the other hand, we also have people who said that it's important for us to have a definition. So just very briefly, in 1 or 2 slides, I just want to share with you, well, I have some slides here with me, but I'm not showing it to you, but for example, do we need a definition? We do have some people, I'm sure all of you, if you're economists, you have heard of Wilfredo Pareto. He's one of those, economists who felt that we don't need to have a definition, right? In fact, to quote him, his article in 1900, it is a waste of time to investigate what economics may be. Yeah? So talking about definitions to Pareto is a waste of time. A very famous development economist who wrote, the Asian drama in 1954. He also, yeah, Gunnar Medel. Economics is the only term regarding the precise definition of which economists need not be concerned. Yeah? The statement that he makes is the only term that you don't need the definition. All right. So, very famous development economists also had a negative view that we don't really need to have definition. I'm just going to stop at these two. Then there are people who actually support there needs to be a definition. Yeah? The most famous is the one that talked about the current definition that we are using now in our textbooks. Lionel Robbins, who wrote in 1935, he said, it is a waste of time not to have a definition. All right? To him, if you don't know or have a definition of what economics is, how do you know that you are making progress? Yeah, so it's important for you to know what economics is, and it's important for you to be able to identify the subject matter and the scope. All right, and therefore, I think, you know, as far as this discussion of definition is concerned, it's good for us to also go back to the views of Thomas Malthus. In 1820, he put a very interesting analogy, all right? And I think maybe this analogy, I think, is excellent for us to get an idea. He asked this question: is economics a pie? A pie, I'm trying to figure out a Malay term for pie. Pie is, it is not kueh. Pie is, I suppose, a bigger version of curry puff. So a pie. Is economics a pie which every economist can make up his own recipe? So whatever the different economists want to make up, they can call it, this is a pie. Okay, so imagine a cook, he's cooking soup and he says it is a pie. And because he is an economist, he says that soup is pie. So is economics a pie which every economist can make with his own recipe? Or is economics a given pie which is basically made up of well-defined and hardly changeable ingredients? All right, now this is a very important analogy. Yeah? When we want to talk about economics, and later on we are going to talk about Islamic economics, what is the parameters of this discipline that we call economics, right? If I want to talk about, I think I always give this example about you know, cooking rice or cooking fish. I call this economics. Definitely nobody will accept this, right? When we talk about economics, it must have a certain subject matter. And we all know that subject matter, right? For example, if you open a textbook on economics, there must be chapter on consumer behavior. There must be chapter on theory of the firm. There must be a discussion of markets. There must be a discussion of factor pricing. And then if you are talking about aggregate level, there must be discussion of GDP. There must be unemployment. This is economics, all right? So the question that Thomas Malthus is putting is very important, right? Economics must have a subject matter. It must have a certain scope. The scope of that subject matter, which we talk about and call this economics. All right. So looking at the no's and the yes. For this particular, few sessions, I think let us agree, right, that we need to have a working definition. We may not all agree 100% on everything, right, that has to come under economics, but there must be a working definition so that we are addressing the same area, we are addressing the same problems. I mean, just imagine if I want to talk about the economy of a country and I'm thinking of GDP, somebody else is thinking about what recipe they are going to cook, and we are now talking to each other. Impossible, right? So there must be a subject matter, there must be limits to the subject matter, there must be some kind of definition. All right, now let me share with you a few of these definitions. Let me just go out here and come back again so that I can share with you a few of these definitions that are given for Islamic economics. All right. Okay, now let me see. I hope everybody can see the screen.
Yeah, nice, very nice.
I'm going to choose a few definitions. There are actually many more definitions given, and if any of you are interested, there is a paper written by Dr. Hafaz Furqani and myself, where we listed out, I don't know, maybe about 15 definitions. I'm just picking and choosing some. Yeah? Muhammad Baqir as-Sadr, one of the early writers of Islamic economics. He wrote this Iqtisaduna in the late 1950s when he was in prison in Iraq. But the English translation only came out in 1983. So this is how he defines Islamic economics. Islamic economics is the way Islam prefers to follow in the pursuit of its economic life. So there is a certain area which you must keep in mind. This is economics. All right. So Islam prefers to follow in this area of economics and to resolve the practical economic problems in line with its concept of justice. So basically, Islamic economics is all about solving your problems in relation to justice. So, this is a kind of definition given by Baqir as-Sadr. Akram Khan, very, very well established scholar who has been writing on Islamic economics, although his own area is actually accounting. He was an accountant in the Accountant General's office in Pakistan, but he has written a lot on Islamic economics. Islamic economics aims at the study of human falah. Okay, falah, ultimate success, achieved by organizing resources on earth on the basis of cooperation and participation. Okay, so Baqir Sadr talks about how Islam solves the economic problems in line with its concept of justice. Akram Khan talking about the study of human falah, how you are going to achieve falah, success in this world as well as success in the hereafter, by organizing the resources on earth. Okay, so again, in the second definition, there is a subject matter. So Islamic economics is not talking about to cook, how to cook food, but it is talking about organizing resources on earth to cooperate with each other, to participate with each other. So human relations, and then human beings and natural resource in order to achieve falah. Okay. Muhammad Abdul Mannan, another pioneer of Islamic economics. Islamic economics is a social science. So now we are getting a more academic definition, right? It is a social science. So in other words, you have to understand what social science is. It is different from a physical science. Social science involves human beings, which studies the economic problems of a people imbued with the values of Islam. Now, very interesting, the choice of words, yeah? Social science that studies the economic problems and of course how they solve the problems of a people imbued with values of Islam, right? Said Haider Naqvi, in his book in 1994, Islamic Economics as a study of the representative Muslims' behavior in a modern Muslim society. Yeah? Representative Muslims' behavior in a modern Muslim society. So we're not talking about, Muslims in the past. We're talking about contemporary Muslim, according to Naqvi. And then Muhammad Arif Zakaullah, may Allah bless his soul, defines Islamic economics as the study of Muslims' behavior, who organizes the resources which are a trust to achieve falah. So in a way, he is using a little bit of Akram Khan's discussion on falah. But look at the three, and I purposely put these three definitions on one slide so that you can try to compare. Manan is talking about people imbued with the values of Islam. Naqvi is talking about the representative Muslims' behavior. Arif is talking about Muslims' behavior. Right? So if you really look at these three definitions, you can see that actually they are very different. Okay, if I start with Muhammad Arif, he's talking about Islamic economics is studying the behavior of Muslims. All right, focused on Muslims. Naqvi, don't confuse representative Muslims' behavior with a Muslim. All right, Naqvi is saying anybody who follows the behavior of a representative Muslim. So a Muslim is supposed to behave like this. Anybody who follows that guideline, he is following the behavior of a representative Muslim, even if he or she is not a Muslim. All right. And then Manan seems to agree with Naqvi, or maybe Naqvi seems to agree with Manan because Manan came earlier. A people imbued with the values of Islam. So he's not talking about Muslims, yeah, by faith. Anybody who follows the values of Islam in the social science, in how they are supposed to consume, how they are supposed to produce, yeah, they can be considered to be a people imbued with values of Islam. Now, these three definitions are very important because at the end of the day, we have to also be clear. Is Islamic economics meant only for Muslims, or is it meant for all mankind? If we say all mankind, then our definition shouldn't talk about only limiting to the behavior of Muslims, right? Naqvi is a little bit different because he's talking about the representative Muslim. Yeah, as I mentioned, the representative Muslim is somebody who follows what the Muslim is supposed to do, even if they are not Muslim, right? Now, if some of you are asking, if you say that it has to be Muslims because only the Muslim will follow the guidelines of the Sharia, not necessarily. In economics, I'm talking about economics, right? Just think about Muslims today, or not today, but Muslims 30, 40 years ago. We were in countries in which the banking system was based on riba. We are Muslims, but we were following a banking system that is not in line with Islam, right? We were following a system that is the representative, I'm not sure what to call, but the representative secular modern economic man. Even though the riba-based system is haram, yet we follow, right? So it means that our economics, if I can use Bakir Sadar's term, iktisaduna, our economics must be an economics that is open to everybody, provided they follow the rules, the regulations, the principles, the ethical values that we talk about from Islamic point of view. Khurshid Ahmad, today, this afternoon, we were having a discussion on Sayyid Abul Ala Maududi, and Khurshid Ahmad, of course, himself very famous Islamic economist. In 1992, he defined Islamic economics as a systematic effort to try and understand the economic problems and man's behavior in relation to the problem from an Islamic perspective. So again, he's not talking about Muslims, not talking about only, you know, certain group of people. It's man's behavior in relation to the problems from an Islamic perspective. So anybody, if they follow Islamic perspective in resolving it, this is Islamic economics. All right. Now, I have my own definition, which I tried to present in an article in 97. Islamic economics as an approach to interpret and solve, again, man's economic problem. I don't talk about Muslims or human beings, based on the values, norms, laws, institutions found in, sometimes you can find the value directly in the source of knowledge. So riba is haram. This is a straightforward hukum, value about riba. So some of the things you find directly in the sources of knowledge, or and derived from the sources of knowledge. Many a time you don't find it directly, you have to derive. Okay, so you have the Quran, you have the Hadith, you have the views of scholars. So sometimes you don't find the solution directly in the Quran. You have to interpret, you have to extract, you have to derive. Okay, so looking at these various definitions, I think the point that I want to highlight here is, it is important for us to have a working definition. It is important for us to have subject matter, which we call economics. And it is important that this subject matter be universal. It cannot only be for one group of people, whether it is by faith, or it is by country, or it is by regional zone. No, it is universal. Anybody who follows the precepts, the dictates of Islam in solving their economic problem, this is Islamic economics. All right, so very quickly, what is Islamic economics in terms of subject matter? If you remember in session 1, we talked about the concept of deen. So Islamic economics is influenced by the deen of Islam. We extract values from the sources of knowledge in Islam. All right. And you know, this term, today we were talking about Maududi. I first was exposed to this idea of ibadah umum, or general ibadah, in Maududi's book Towards Understanding Islam. Yeah, in 1980 or 81, I remember reading this little book called Towards Understanding Islam. And for the first time, this idea of ibadah is not only the salah, it's not only the zakat, it's not only the hajj, but it is everything that you do. Yeah. So Islamic economics is also potentially ibadah. Yeah, but it is not the ritualistic ibadah. It is what Maududi termed as general ibadah. Islamic economics is not the same as fiqh mu'amalat. Unfortunately, I think many of us sometimes, we tend to overdo the relationship of fiqh mu'amalat to Islamic economics. Although fiqh mu'amalat has inputs in Islamic economics, they are not the same. Yeah? So I'm sure we can discuss this if you have any queries. But when we are talking about Islamic economics, we shouldn't only limit our discussion to fiqh or even to usul fiqh, the methodology. We also get inputs from other aspects of our Torah, from kalam, from falsafah, from history, even from tasawwuf. Yeah? Some would say many of the ethical values that we are talking about that we need to have in economics, even though we may not read it directly from the books of tasawwuf, they are talking about akhlaq, they are talking about those guiding ethical values that are supposed to be part of your Islamic economics. Yeah? So Islamic economics must have inputs from this variety of different areas in our Torah. Yeah? From fiqh mu'amalat, from kalam, from falsafah, from history, from tasawwuf. Deals with human behavior. All right, and as I think we have already clearly tried to indicate, it is not only for Muslims, it should be for all human beings. But it is the representative Muslim behavior that we must be clear about. So when we want to develop our model, when we want to develop the normative aspect of the model, it must be based on the representative Muslims behavior. That's the ideal. Yes, that means the representative Islamic man, if I can put that term, behaves like this, like this, like this, and then it is open to anybody. It must deal with economics, consumption, production, distribution, market structure, the role of the state, the role of markets. It must talk about unemployment, inflation. Yeah, it's not talking about how many calories you get when you eat this food. This is not economics. All right. We don't talk about how to choose your leader in economics. This is something maybe in politics. How to do salat. This is not economics discussion. This is maybe something you will learn in fiqh ibadah. Yeah? Fiqh ibadah khusus. So economics has got a certain subject matter which we must try to approach and try to resolve with reference to our deen. All right. Now, in order to develop Islamic economics, we need the Torah, but we also need to interact with modern knowledge, including modern economics. Yeah? Very important. Yeah? In other words, when we want to interact with our knowledge that we have today, it may not only be with economics. We may also have to interact with political science, with sociology, with maybe some aspects of psychology, in order for us to develop Islamic economics. Our Torah on one side, modern knowledge on the other side. Islamic economics is based on Islam and its sources of knowledge. We need to address contemporary economic problems using our sources of knowledge. It must interact with both Torah and modern knowledge. Right? Now, the challenge, of course, is How are we going to interact with modern knowledge? How are we going to interact with Torah? And to talk about this, well, we will keep this for the next session when we move to our third question, which is how do we develop Islamic economics? All right. So I think with this, maybe we will stop the presentation. I now look forward to getting some of your maybe questions, and maybe we can try to answer them, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Prof. So we start first with Brother Afrad. He's always ready with the question. And then Brother Moshood after that. Go ahead, Brother Afrad.
Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Waalaikumsalam.
Earlier you mentioned that Islamic economics is not only about fiqh muamalah. This is interesting because fiqh muamalah is also about maliyah or wealth, and one of the subject of economic, of course, is wealth. How to produce wealth, consume wealth, distribution of wealth. Please elaborate more about this, because in my humble opinion, I think the safest way to learn economic, to make it to make it a pahala as an ibadah, is through fiqh muamalah. Yeah, please explain it to us. Thank you, Prof.
Okay, thank you very much. Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much, Brother Afrad. Let me be clear. I am not saying that fiqh mu'amalat is not giving inputs. Definitely, fiqh mu'amalat gives inputs in our discipline called Islam. I'm just saying that when we want to talk about Islamic economics, it goes more than just, you mentioned wealth. Islamic economics is not only about how to deal with wealth. If you look at the evolution, at the development of modern economics in the West, it was exactly as you mentioned. They started talking about economics as a science of wealth, economics as dealing with money. They were looking at the object, the object of study. What are you studying? Wealth, property, money. But there was another definition that came about, I think, close to the 20th century. And economics moved away from talking about the object. It started talking about the subject. It is about human beings, right? So when you talk about human beings, now the discussion is not about the wealth, but how human beings interact with each other. Yeah. So when you talk about buyer and seller, there is an interaction. There is no wealth directly from that, right? But I'm buying something, you are selling something. So we are interacting. Yeah. So the point I'm trying to say is, yes, fiqh mu'amalat is part of Islamic economics, but it is not equal. In other words, fiqh mu'amalat cannot be equal to Islamic economics. Now, there is a very good, in fact, there are many papers written on this. I would just maybe recommend a paper written by Anas Zarqa. I can't remember offhand. If I do, I will maybe bring it up in the next session. Anas Zarqa has written about this very clearly. Even Mahmoud Abu Saud has talked about this. That Islamic economics is much more than just the fiqh mu'amalat discussion. Fiqh mu'amalat is part of the discussion, but Islamic economics, is talking about human behavior, is talking about motivation. So it is also involving psychological dimension, understanding human nature. Fiqh mu'amalat sometimes just gives you the rules. It gives you the rules. So hopefully we can maybe give more elaboration next week when we talk about how we develop Islamic economics.
Okay, we go to Brother Samsul Idul Adha. Brother Mashood, there is a background noise. I'll come back to you. Brother Samsul first.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shahlan. Prof, I think it is interesting about your presentation related to the definition of Islamic economics. But I think I have a serious problem, a serious question about this. Using this definition of Islamic economic, how we can elaborate or construct an econometric model of how we can elaborate this definition into an empirical model, a problem-solving approach. I think this is the point of my question. Thank you very much for your answer.
Okay, so if you look at the definitions that are given, they are very general. Yeah, but Lionel Robbins is also giving a very general definition. He's just talking about economics is all about how you deal with scarce resources that can have alternative uses. How do you go from that definition to modeling? Yeah, they have done it in modern economics. Similarly, we are talking about solving the challenges and the problems of consumption, production, distribution, but we have to look into our sources of knowledge. So what are our sources of knowledge? We have all the sources of knowledge that they have in modern economics. We use reason, we use observation, we use our senses. We will also use the tools, mathematics, econometrics. We will use all of these. The only difference is we also have revelation. So when we are developing our model, let's say of banking and finance, all right, we may use the models that have been put forward, provided it does not contradict our value system. So if you want to talk about how a bank is going to be allocating resources, by all means, look at the literature written in modern banking. But the Quran says riba is haram. And therefore, if we agree interest is riba, then you cannot have riba. You cannot have interest. You need to have replacement for the function of interest. Yeah, don't also sometimes think, how can we survive without interest? Yeah, you just need to replace the function of interest. What does interest do? Interest is the price, right? It is the price of money capital, right? And we already have a solution. We either talk about the profit rate. I buy something and I sell to you, so it's a profit rate rather than an interest rate, because it is a sale contract. But I also have the profit sharing ratio. So instead of a fixed price, I use profit sharing ratio. So we can develop our models. In fact, there are so many works that have already been done. They have developed elaborate models on risk sharing economy. Yeah, very early, I think in the 1980s, mid-80s, Dr. Muhammad Anwar wrote his PhD thesis talking about a macroeconomic model which uses a profit sharing ratio instead of interest rate. Yeah, so it was done in the mid-80s. More recently, Prof. Abbas Mirajo and various colleagues have written so many works on how profit sharing ratio can be simulated in the economy to replace the function of interest rate. So, there is no reason why we cannot survive without interest rate. Our problem is not surviving without interest rate. Our problem is the whole world is using interest rate. So when you want to interact with other people, you want to interact with what? Right? If they can follow us and interact on our terms, that means we use the profit sharing ratio, we can interact. But Why do they want to interact with us on profit sharing ratio? They will say interact on interest, right? So this is the challenge we have, right? So I know in some of the banking transactions, if they are dealing with non-Muslims or non-Islamic party, they will come to agreement. Who are you going to follow? Our rule or your rule, right? And if the other party agrees that they are going to use Islamic, let's say, system, then they write a contract. Both parties agree, follow the Islamic ruling. Yeah, of course. Then the problem is they will take it to the High Court, and then the High Court will overrule the earlier. This is the more practical problem. But you can develop alternatives. You can develop models. You can develop elaborate, sophisticated tools using the values and the principles and norms that you get from Islam.
Yeah, Prof. That's a simple question but difficult to answer here from Sister.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Yes.
Wait, brother. They say, does a woman have to be hijab to be an advocate and practitioner of Islamic economics?
Does a woman have to be wearing hijab in order to practice Islamic
Does
economics?
a woman have to be hijab to be
yes.
an advocate and practitioner of Islamic economics?
Yeah, well, I the person who asked the question, I suppose if you are following Islamic banking and finance, today you have Islamic banking and finance all over the world. And in many countries, many of the practitioners of Islamic banking who go and give lectures on Islamic banking, they are non-Muslims, right? So whether they are male or female, they don't share our deen. Yet they are proponents of Islamic banking and finance. Similarly, even in Islamic economics, we have some non-Muslims who are.
Oh, sorry. We are losing you. I mute you. Okay, please unmute. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so
Sorry.
you have many non-Muslims who are proponents of Islamic economics or Islamic banking and finance. Now, when it comes to the women, of course, you have an added challenge about, the hijab, right? There are many non-Muslim women who are also promoting Islamic banking. And sometimes when you go to this function, it's very awkward because you are listening to, not only a non-Muslim, but sometimes somebody who, is not covering aura. I wouldn't want to say that what he or she is talking is not Islamic economics, because wearing the hijab is maybe a rule that is dealing with a different chapter. It is a different chapter in, if I can give you example, it is like your CGPA. Yeah. The CGPA is made up of many courses over many semesters. But every semester you have GPA. I don't know how many of you are university students, so you can appreciate this example. Yeah. You have different courses. Certain course you get an A, but in certain course you get an F. All right. Now, if that course is not the economics course, you still got an A in economics, but you fail in some other course, right? So I prefer to look at whether Muslims or non-Muslims are talking about Islamic economics in that context. I look for what they are saying on economics. All right. If what they are saying in economics is right, they are promoting Islamic economics. All right. But as far as their aura is concerned, that's a different chapter. They may get a C, or they may get a D, or they may get an F, right? But it shouldn't, to me, it shouldn't impact the economics of what they are saying. And I think this applies even to Muslims. Yeah? We cannot insist that all Muslims who want to talk about anything to do with Islamic economics can only be taken seriously if they are wearing hijab. I mean, for women. Yeah? I suppose similarly for men, if you are not covering your aura and you are talking about Islamic economics also, it is problematic. But look at what they are saying about Islamic economics, rather than judging everything based on what they are wearing. Yeah, I don't know how this answer will go down with some of you, but you know, I like this CGPA, GPA example. It makes life easier. We don't judge somebody's Islamic economics on other aspects of their life.
Thank you, Prof. Okay, brother Asadullah Hill Galib, go ahead.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Professor, nice presentation, but I have some questions. Firstly, you mentioned about the definition of Nakvi, and you said the meaning of representative means or includes Muslims and non-Muslims, but I don't think so. Representative is an adjective, so it qualifies the word Muslim. Therefore, he must not be a general Muslim. He must be a Muslim who can represent Islam. The second question is that you say that Islamic economics is a form of ibadah, but I think Islamic economics is a form of al-ita' or at-ta'a, because in order to be an ibadah, there must be some nas, there must be some clear text, because ibadah is a defined form, like salat, like siyam, like zakat. But Islamic economics, you can define it as alita, atta, not as an ibadah. Of course, we will get some sawab if we do in accordance with Islamic principles, but it is not a form of ibadah, in my opinion. Would you explain it?
Okay, thank you very much. Now, your first point about Nakvi's definition. Well, you know, I really wish we can, as far as I know, Nakvi is still, you know, still with us. We need to maybe ask him what he meant by a representative Muslim. What I do know is he is talking about an ideal. Yeah. So even if you want to take representative Muslim to mean the ideal Muslim, there is a certain ideal that you are comparing with. So even Muslims may not meet that ideal Muslim behavior, all right? Similarly, even if you are non-Muslim by faith, but you follow everything else, I don't know whether or not we would want to exclude non-Muslims who follow everything. You know, just imagine, today of course it's very difficult to imagine that you have an Islamic system running every country and non-Muslims follow the rules that you are setting. And if they follow the rules, is it Islamic economics? To me, it is Islamic economics in practice. What about at the individual level? Well, this person may or may not get the thawab. They may only get the return in this world, but they may not get in the hereafter. But this is not our role to, you know, to make judgment on whether the person getting thawab or not. So this is the first point. The second question about whether it is ibadah, I was actually very much focusing on this maybe 1970s, 80s, maybe even 60s view about Islam as a complete way of life. And if you are reading the works of, in this case, Maududi, who talks about this ibadah khusus and ibadah umum, he points it out like that. Another scholar who gives this view is Professor Naqib Al-Attas. From the term deen, he goes to the root word of deen is dana, and then from dana, he explains different aspects, and he comes to the conclusion the role of human being is to be in constant ibadah to Allah. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you know, every week of your life. It's not only during the prayer time, the Ramadan, the Monday, Thursday fasting. Everything you do. In that sense, this is what ibadah means. Now, you are talking, maybe this is ta'ah, it is not ibadah. Okay, maybe we can discuss further. But I like the idea of everything you do is potentially making ibadah to Allah. Why? Professor Latas talks about repaying the debt. Yeah, from this word dana, it's not only deen, but you also get dain, you get debt, right? So you are paying back this debt not only when you are in salah, not only when you are fasting. When you do your economics, you are also following the guidelines, right? So this is my way of looking at it. I think it's a very powerful idea when you look at everything that we do as part of ibadah. I'm also okay with the idea of ta'ah, and you know, we may try to further develop this. But I like this idea of ibadah khusus and ibadah umum. I think it's very effective.
A final question from Brother Nuruddin. I want to ask about economy as an order. What is the economic order desired by Islam?
Economic order, I'm assuming it's talking about like the system or the framework, right? So, you know, I don't know how many of you were able to join us in our session this afternoon. We were talking about, you know, Sayyid Abul Ala Maududi and his first principles of Islamic economics. I described him, not, of course, he himself was not an economist. When we talk about Islamic economists, we will talk about Najatullah Siddiqui, we'll talk about Khurshid Ahmad. These were people who were trained in economics. But Maududi, you know, is beyond economics. And, you know, he was talking about Islam as a complete way of life. And therefore, he also had inputs on what the guidelines given in Islam to economics are. So from his view, and because it's clear, you know, from what he was saying, the Islamic economic order, if I can use that term, talks about, among other things, the important role of the individual. So Maududi is somebody who doesn't envision a state-dominated system. He sees a market system. He sees individuals playing the major role. But it is not just the rational economic man. He's talking about, if I can use the term, the Islamic man, the representative Muslim, you know, that is the person in the system. And it is this person who is interacting with other people and with nature, right? So market-oriented system, people following the rules, the values, the norms that you find in the Quran, in the Sunnah, in the secondary sources of knowledge, right? And the goal is to establish justice. Yeah? So whether we are talking about consumption, whether we are talking about production, whether we are talking about distribution, it's always focused on establishing justice. What else can we say about the Islamic economic order? Certainly the features will be, it is not having any element of riba. So there should be nothing which is haram in that system. Of course, the reality may be we cannot get rid of everything which is haram immediately. So there has to be some strategy for us to take in order to improve the system, right? So certainly if you look and see in contemporary times, we may have started with one Islamic bank. Today we have a full Islamic financial system running parallel. Now, some people will say, is that good enough? No, we would like to make sure that you don't have the haram. If possible, only Islamic alternative, right? But reality is such that until you can show that your system is better, it's very difficult for you to convince other people. So it is a evolving system, but there are central rules which you can get from the Quran, from the Sunnah, from the secondary sources, that you need to keep and become your reference point, so that everything that you do is always evaluated based on the reference point. Wallahu a'lam.
Thank you so much, Prof. Any final words, Prof, before we end?
Well, I just want to say that in the next couple of classes, we will be hopefully focusing on the question, how to develop. And I think on this third area, I would like to also, this is a IIIT sponsored program. And so I will be, of course, focusing on the Islamization of knowledge agenda. Now we call it, or the term used is integration of knowledge. And we will try to see how Islamization fits into this idea of integration in the process of trying to develop Islamic economics, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Prof. See you again next week. You work so hard. Keep health. Okay, everyone. See everyone tomorrow and for other classes, inshallah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.